Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Bet you didn't know bliss looked like this, right? Krishna. Krishna Chaitanya. Oh. Krishna. Krishna Krishna Krishna. The temporariness of this material situation is a very real thing. The situation itself is illusory, but the illusory nature of it is real. That's the only real thing about this temporary world, is that it's temporary and it is an illusion. That's real. Everything else has no substance, doesn't endure, has a beginning and an end, is filled with misery along the way. That's also real. Oh, somebody's at the door. Hang on. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Yes, hi. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yeah. So we were reading yesterday in Bhagavad Gita that is real knowledge, to know the difference between spirit and matter, the difference between what is eternal and doesn't end, and that which is temporary and illusory. That's real knowledge. Hey, Lance, Hare Krishna. And I was just I was looking at, my mind was looking at, where's there anything actually permanent in this world? I mean, even you build some big building, it lasts for a little while, and then the sun, the wind, the rain, the insects, it's gone. I mean, who built the pyramids and why anyway? Who knows? Let's dig through the bones and the sand and find some relics that'll help us understand who and why was here and what for. This is a temporary place. And yet people, because they don't actually grasp that there is a permanent atmosphere, put all their effort and energy into trying to construct something that will last. Or try to have lots of children so that your heritage can be carried on. But even the greatest person, they're here for a while, and then who even knows they were here? I mean, like Kennedy, it was a terrible tragedy. He had a lot going for him, JFK. So we still kind of sort of remember him, George Washington, Napoleon, all these people in history for now. But eventually that'll all be gone, because who built the pyramids anyway? Where's the record? But in a line of living succession, the important history of the realized souls who were not acting on the temporary field of activity, but were engaged in the permanent, eternal activity of devotional service to Krishna, to the Lord. That history stays alive in a living succession all the way from the beginning of this creation. Lord Brahma, the first created living being. So that stays. That is the devotional, spiritual line. That stays. Everything else, and then who even knows if the history was recorded nicely? There's a saying that when there's conflict, the winners write the history. So there's nothing in this world that lasts. And I'm here, and I'll be gone. And no one will even know. And honestly, who even cares? When I'm gone, I don't even want to know that I was here. Boy, did I take a wrong turn coming here. So who even cares? But this knowledge and the path back to the spiritual atmosphere is available through a line of spiritual teachers. And their history remains. Hare Krishna. There's just a lot going on this morning. So sometimes people, they hear about these intimate pastimes of loving exchange in the spiritual world, but they don't have the right understanding, they don't have the foundation, that these have nothing to do with earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, or false ego or intelligence. It has nothing to do with any of the material elements, which combine and uncombine, and then recombine and then uncombine, life after life, body after body, in a cycle of reincarnation for the living entity. It has nothing to do with that. There's a whole nother atmosphere. It has no beginning, no end. There's no old age, there's no disease, there's no birth, there's no ignorance. There's no need for So Krishna says, for the sun and the moon, because everything's effulgent. Who needs the sun or the moon to get a light source? And if the sun and the moon are not visible, then it's dark. No, everything's effulgent in the spiritual atmosphere. There's no need for sun or moon or electricity. So understanding, really getting it about how this is temporary. See, the tendency is to want to work really hard and then enjoy the results of the work. Work really hard, get some money, and then try to enjoy the fruits of the labor. But it's temporary. And in that way become entangled, life after life, trying to enjoy the fruits of. That's why Krishna says, whatever you do, whatever sacrifices you make, working 10 hours a day, 7 days a week in a hospital somewhere, whatever sacrifices you make, whatever you do it as an offering to me. You become free from the illusion. And eligible to actually begin to become conscious and aware of the eternal abode, the eternal place. Become free from all of the life after life, birth after birth. So you start to become really aware of what the situation actually is, this illusion that we're in, that drives us to act in different ways and to desire temporary things, and you can actually become a little aware of that. Then become eligible to hear about and begin to enter into the spiritual atmosphere. You actually become transformed from the inside out. You kind of like turn inside out. Krishna. Oh man. So I was chanting, and then I was reading a little verse here from Bhagavad Gita. This is chapter 2, Bhagavad Gita as it is, by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Chapter 2, text 17. Krishna is speaking about the nature of the soul and the material situation to Arjuna, who's faced with a very difficult material situation. He's a warrior, and the enemy is, on the other side, is his family members, his teachers, and practically all of society that he knows. They're all on the other side. But they're out of line. They're in ignorance, and they're motivated, ill-motivated, to try to exploit the material. And it's time to clean that out so that the light of love of God can be uncovered, because they're blocking it. It has to be uncovered. But they're all his family members, so it's very difficult for Arjuna. And Krishna speaking. There's a series of verses here. They're very beautiful. This one's 17. Now, they're together, right there. Arjuna and Krishna, they're right there, together, on Arjuna's chariot. Just before the battle. So He's turned to Krishna. He says, please advise me. They're friends and they're cousins. They're related. But I take shelter of you. Please advise me. I don't know what to do. So then instead of just being a friend, Krishna begins to speak full of knowledge. He begins to act as Arjuna's mentor, his teacher, his spiritual master. He says, avināśi tu tad viddhi, yena sarvam idaṁ tatam, vināśam avyayasyāsya na kaścit kartum arhati. No, that which pervades the entire body is indestructible. No one is able to destroy the imperishable soul. Prabhupada's commentary, a long commentary, Prabhupada says, this verse more clearly explains the real nature of the soul, which is spread all over the body. Anyone can understand what is spread over the body. It's consciousness. Everyone is conscious of the pains and pleasures of the body in part or as a whole. The spreading of consciousness is limited within one's own body. The pains and pleasures of one body are unknown to another. Therefore, each and every body is the embodiment of an individual soul. And the symptom of the soul's presence is perceived as individual consciousness. Now, that's really logical. Everybody knows what's going on in their own body, but they don't know what's really going on in anyone else's. So they're all individuals. Everyone's an individual. The soul is described as 1/10,000th part of the upper portion of the hair in size. The tip of a hair, 1/10,000th part. The Śvetāśvatara Upaniṣad confirms this. Some Sanskrit here I'm not familiar with, I'll just skip over. Translation: when the upper point of a hair is divided into 100 parts, and again, each part is further divided into 100 parts. Each such part is the measurement of the dimension of the spirit soul. So we don't have a microscope that can measure that yet. And then in Bhagavatam, there's also a verse. There are innumerable particles of spiritual atoms which are measured as 1/10,000th of the upper portion of the hair. Therefore, the individual particle of spirit soul is a spiritual atom smaller than material atoms, and such atoms are innumerable. This very small spiritual spark is the basic principle of the material body, and the influence of such a spiritual spark is spread all over the body as the influence of the active principle of some medicine spreads throughout the body. This current of the spirit soul is felt all over the body as consciousness, and that is the proof of the presence of the soul. Any layman can understand that the material body minus consciousness is a dead body, and this consciousness cannot be revived in the body by any means of material administration. Therefore, consciousness is not due to any amount of material combination, but to the spirit soul. In the Mundaka Upanishad, the measurement of the atomic spirit soul is further explained. Quote, the soul is atomic in size, can be perceived by perfect intelligence. The atomic soul is floating in the 5 kinds of air. Prana, apana, yena, samana, udana. So the soul is floating in 5 kinds of air, and these 5 kinds of airs they're floating in the body. The body is made of earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, and intelligence. And then the false ego is thinking that's me. So the soul is floating in the 5 kinds of air. The soul is situated within the heart and spreads its influence all over the body of the embodied living entities. So how is this air traveling through the body? Is it traveling in the bloodstream? We'd think so. One thing, when the soul is purified from the contamination of the 5 kinds of material air, its spiritual influence is exhibited. Freed from the influence of these 5 kinds of air that it's floating in. In other words, being carried away by these different 5 kinds of air. He's floating, but he's being carried away by these 5 kinds of air. When I heard the verse about how Agni is in charge of speech, he's the controller of speech, god of fire, Agni, I wanted to know how. How does that work? How is fire related to speech? And I tried to do a little research on it, and one thing that came out of it is that these demigods work together. They have to work together in order to maintain everything, to maintain the big universe and to maintain the living entity whose body is like a universe. It's described the soul is situated within the body like the sun is situated in the universe. So the sun's energy pervades everything in the heat and light and the rays of the universe, the sun. So the spirit soul situated within the heart, traveling on, being carried away by these different types of air, traveling through the body. But they work together. The demigod in charge of water works with the demigod in charge of fire. And they work together with the demigod in charge of air. They all work together. We could learn a lot from that. How to work together. The other thing that came out from trying to understand how Agni, the controller of fire, is the controller of speech, is that his consort, Swaha, like when there's a fire sacrifice performed, she's called upon, Swaha, and she's actually the goddess of speech. So Agni is the controller of speech, but she's the demigoddess of speech. So there's a relationship there, which would be interesting to look further into. Because whenever there's a fire sacrifice performed, appealing to Agni, then Swaha is there. The mantras are chanted, Swaha, Swaha. So there's some kind of connection there also. So, Hare Krishna. Okay. Prabhupada continues, the Hatha Yoga system is meant for controlling the 5 kinds of air, encircling the pure soul by different kinds of sitting postures. Not for material profit, but for liberation of the minute soul from the entanglement of material atmosphere. Hare Krishna. It's very scientific. It's probably why it's also good for health, because purifying the airs within the body, even on a material platform. But ultimately, Prabhupada explains, it's meant for controlling these airs which are covering the soul. The soul is being carried through the body by these different types of airs. So the constitution of the atomic soul is admitted in all Vedic literatures. It's actually felt in the practical experience of any sane man. Only an insane man can think of this atomic soul as all-pervading. Vishnu Tattva. Some people say that they're God. It's crazy. Because God knows what's going on in everyone's body. The influence of the atomic soul can be spread all over a particular body. And according to the Mandaka Upanishad, this atomic soul is situated in the heart of every living entity. And because the measurement of the atomic soul is beyond the power of appreciation of material scientists, some of them assert foolishly, there is no soul. The individual atomic soul is definitely there in the heart, along with the supersoul, and thus all the energies of bodily movement are emanating from this part of the body, the heart. The corpuscles, which carry the oxygen from the lungs, gather energy from the soul. So that's one kind of air, oxygen. The corpuscles, which carry oxygen from the lungs, gather energy from the soul. When the soul passes away from this position, activity of the blood generating fusion ceases. Medical science accepts the importance of red corpuscles, but it cannot ascertain that the source of the energy is the soul. Medical science, however, does admit that the heart is the seat of all energies of the body. Such atomic particles of the spirit whole are compared to the sunshine molecules. In the sunshine, there are innumerable radiant molecules. Similarly, the fragmental parts of the Supreme Lord are atomic sparks of the rays of the Supreme Lord, called by the name Prabha, or superior energy. Neither Vedic knowledge nor modern science denies the existence of the spirit soul in the body. And the science of the soul is explicitly described in Bhagavad Gita by the personality of Godhead himself. So some people foolishly say, previously Prabhupada said, some of the material scientists assert foolishly there is no soul. But later now Prabhupada says, but really the modern science, they don't deny the existence of the spirit soul in the body. Although they don't understand it. So this Bhagavad Gita, the science of the soul, is explicitly described in Bhagavad Gita by the personality of Godhead himself. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. You want to get free of being carried around by the different life airs in the body, being swept away, chant Hare Krishna. You get free from the influence of swept away by the life airs in the body. Krishna Chaitanya,